So I'm sure you've heard about the other ones. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, race got interjected very quickly. You know, I find it amazing that you turn on CNN. So in Floyd's case, you turn on CNN, MSNBC, we're watching a modern day lynching. You turn on Fox News, he's a drug addict, convict, stuck up a pregnant lady, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, the guy's a scumbag, had it coming. And there's nothing in the middle. Welcome to the Lionz Den, episode 37. My name's Eddy.
And this is Daryl.
I'm Brad.
So today we're going to talk about something we've kind of been avoiding since we started the podcast. It's actually one of the ones I get the most requests for. Avoid it because it's filled with landmines, and it's not something that you know, we're going to solve in a podcast, but I think it's important to talk about it finally. One, it's making me crazy, so I have a cathartic need to talk about it. All I'm really hoping to accomplish by the conversation is just exhibiting how to have a conversation about it, because we're lacking it. But today we're going to be talking about race, policing, and crime. You know, obviously we've had another incident in Memphis. I've personally seen the videos. I know, Daryl, you said you hadn't seen it yet.
I have not. I saw a clip unexpectedly this morning, but I didn't really watch it.
Do you know which one you saw? What clip? What was going on in it?
It was them actually beating them on the street.
Oh, okay, so you saw the far away one? You haven't seen anything yet,
I didn't
Brad?
see anything. Yeah, I haven't.
So, you know, in this particular incident, if I remember right, there's 4 clips. 3 are police cams, body cams.
This was a mixed one that I kind of got clips of. You can tell some of it was body cam footage.
Oh, gotcha. Somebody kind of mixed it all together. One was taken from, you know, the cameras that they have in certain neighborhoods. So, you know, it's taken away from a distance. I've been through it. It's happened quite a few times. One in Minnesota. But what's that? It's been 2 years or a year.
About 2 years, yeah.
That was, what was his name?
Minnesota.
Floyd,
yeah. George Floyd.
I'm sure people remember, I think it was in Ferguson, year or two before that. About the same time as Floyd was Breonna Taylor. The one that kind of set it off, Florida.
The kid.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
Trayvon Martin. So, I mean, there's been a lot of different instances with this. Sometimes citizens, well, really only case was with Trayvon Martin. You know, a lot with police. This one was unique because it was all black officers.
Yeah. I mean, the other one that were sentences was Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. None of those guys were in any form of law enforcement or just...
Right. Yeah, that was the other one. That was just a little bit after, too, wasn't it? Or about the same time, too.
It was about the same time as Floyd, right after.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'll be perfectly clear. I don't claim to understand, know what either the individuals that were involved in it, what their thought process is, what they're thinking on either side, meaning both the police and victims, or however you want to look at it. I'm not claiming to. We're just strictly having a discussion about it. For me, my background, real young, you know, started doing a lot of volunteer work in inner city, was a big brother for a real long time. Basketball coach, inner city programs, had a lot of friends in the projects. So I'm going to let everybody know a little secret. I'm not black. So
Can't confirm.
Yes.
Not claiming to be. But definitely have a lot of interaction.
Sure.
You know, again, I've been in the neighborhoods from a little different perspective. being white and being in those neighborhoods. So, you know, again, not trying to claim that I understand fully any of it. But, you know, what I really want to talk about is just some of the realities of it, and most importantly, the sensationalism of it. And it's kind of good you guys haven't seen the full videos, because I'm sure, have you heard anything about it, Brad?
I try and, you know, bury my head in the sand with new stuff. You know,
it's not a bad call.
It's not a...
So I'm sure you've heard about the other ones. So,
yeah,
you know, I mean, race got interjected very quickly. Sure. You know, I find it amazing that you turn on CNN. So in Floyd's case, you turn on CNN, MSNBC. We're watching a modern day lynching. You turn on Fox News. He's a drug addict, convict, stuck up a pregnant lady. Blah, blah, blah. Essentially, the guy's a scumbag, had it coming. And there's nothing in the middle.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. And kind of my point with it is we keep having the same conversations over and over and over again. Nothing gets resolved. And inevitably, it happens again. And we're having the exact same conversations over and over again. This one throws a bit of a loop in it because all the officers were black. So it kind of pulls the race card out of it and gets into more it's a police thing. All of us do have tons of friends that were officers, our officers.
Family members.
Family members. So... Again, newsflash, there are complete ass police officers. There are wonderful police officers. There are complete ass black people. There are wonderful black people. Complete ass white, wonderful white. List goes on and on and on and on. We seem to, as a society, have a very difficult time accepting that. And also understanding certain lanes. And it's great for Daryl to be part of this conversation too, because not just the fact that he's black, but he served. And we've had quite a few conversations about that. You know, anytime that you're in, so one thing I'll say is everybody's fight or flight, everybody's completely different parameters. Meaning some people get scared very quickly and either go to extremes, running, or you know, violent extremes. Other people have a very long wick. Everybody's very different. And anytime you get into any type of position that is safety-oriented, protected-oriented, any of that type of thing, you're going to play into that. I can't think of the other officer. Actually went to jail in Chicago.
In Chicago?
What was his name? Anyways.
Was it recent?
Oh, it's been a couple years now. Kid was walking down the street with a knife. You know, if I remember right, he was on PCP.
I remember that, yeah.
Causing a bunch of disturbances. There was 3-4 officers on the scene. This officer comes in, starts lighting the kid up, emptied a clip into him, ended up going to jail over it. You know, and again, CNN was a foster kid, it's been in and out of trouble, different parents constantly. You get the story of this kid's life and how did it come down to this? Cop's an asshole. You go to Fox News, walking around with a knife. What did you think was going to happen? Yada, yada, yada. And my point is there's a happy medium to both. There's a reality to both of those. And until we understand that, it's just going to keep happening over and over and over again. And that's why I said at the beginning, I'm not here to lay blame at either. I'm not either of them. I have my own opinions on each individual situation. We'll definitely talk about them. But again, anytime you're in that protective position, the world looks drastically different. So, for you, Daryl, when you served, where were you at?
Iraq, Afghanistan.
So, for the people that you were fighting against, what's their uniform?
Nothing. They wear plain clothes.
So they look like everybody else?
Yep.
So how do you know who's the bad guy, who's the good guy?
You don't. So with that, you have like a certain type of rules of engagement that allows you to determine it. And with that, even that's not foolproof, because somebody can be a combatant one moment and then not another moment, and vice versa. And that's typically how it worked, is vice versa. You would see them in town, in and around Baghdad, and they would be doing their daily errands or anything like that. And then they can turn into combatants in a split second, because they've been waiting to see a patrol, or they've been waiting for opportunity to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. With that, though, so I've never been a police officer or anything, but a part of what we did in Iraq was community policing. And with the Memphis situation, what I kind of see is people getting, and this is not making excuses for the officers, because from the little of what I've seen, they were clearly out of pocket, not within the lines of duty.
Unequivocally.
But I know how people get like that, because they feel like they are fighting a war, and they don't have that regard for human life, because everybody is a combatant to them. And they may have had some pent-up aggressions and stuff like that. It's inexcusable. But the point that I take from that is that you have to adjust the way you think and the way you look at the communities that you're policing if you're a police officer. And that could be hard. That could be really hard if you go out there, there's no love being, coming towards you. Everything is at opposition. It's hard to maintain that level of humanity. But something has to be done to make it to you understand that you're serving those people. You're not like a warden or,
Sure.
Just who you work for. Little that I read, I was trying to see what the probable cause for the stop was. Looked like it was reckless driving. But then I didn't see the long distance videos. What I read, it said there was nothing that showed that he needed to be accosted or assaulted like that. I haven't seen that part. The clip that I saw this morning, they were already on him. But I feel like the aggression stemmed from somewhere else. And he was the recipient of a bunch of aggression from other places. So it's something that needs to be done within the police departments and the community and the training to change the way that you view the people that you are policing. And I don't know how or what to do, but I can't identify the issue.
And I mean, that's why I asked you specifically, because I know you experienced it. And the reason why I'm bringing up that point is, we watch World War I movies, World War II movies. The guys were the heroes. We knew exactly who the good guys were. We knew exactly who the bad guys were. We championed them. There's a bunch of great movies. John Wayne. These guys were heroes, super cool. You start getting into Korean, Vietnam War, where there's no longer an official uniform, not really sure who the bad guy is, who the good guy is, and lines start getting crossed. You have movies like Platoon that shows exactly what those lines are getting crossed. And, my point is, when we discuss this stuff, there's a sociology to it, there's a psychology to it, and there's a human nature aspect to it. And you really can't have any discussion about it without accepting all three of those and understanding that then you have two different sides with all three of those perspectives. Daryl and I have talked about it quite a bit. When Daryl, even when he was there, never really carried any kind of racist ideal of, all these people are terrorists. They can, let me shoot them and God will sort them out later. Never really took that mentality.
No.
Never really carried that. I'm sure you had fellow soldiers that did feel like that.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I base, especially this specific scenario with Memphis. And is it Tyree Nichols or Tyree?
Yes.
This because I've worked with guys that had an intense hate for the locals, specifically, and I was in Baghdad, Sauder City area, in which Sauder City was very, very hostile area, and it was people who just hated everybody that was there. But the way I looked at it is that they didn't choose to be here. These people, this is where they live, and we're kind of occupying their space. So you should expect a certain level of resistance, right? So I didn't hate the people that were at the market, or, you know, even if that was somebody that I'll be engaging later, I just look at it as I might be engaging this guy later. But right now, he's just a guy, you know, buying stuff that he wants to buy. But it's really hard to have that understanding. Not that I'm better than anybody. It just takes a little bit more fucks and thought process. And sometimes people don't have the capacity to do that, or they have the capacity and they just don't want to do it. You know, they're like, because I've had that conversation with guys in Iraq at the time. And I'm like, yeah, why do you hate these people? There's not nobody to hate, you know? And they're like, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. I'm like, yeah, but was it that specific person?
Right.
You know? And they can understand the thought process, but it's easier to just hate everybody.
For sure.
You know? So to me, whenever you see that generalization of it, like when you look at Fox and you look at CNN and how they just are polar opposites, black and white, you know, everything has that gray area, right? So where this side of it meshes into the other side of it, and then you get the truest form of it in that area somewhere. But that takes a lot of listening and talking and thinking that not a lot of people want to do. You know,
for sure,
it's a lot more work to figure out what's really going on or what's causing people to behave the way that they're behaving. And it's a lot easier to just be like, you know what, they're doing it and I fucking hate them.
Right.
So, and I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of these scenarios. Lazy mindsets.
Well, yeah, I think it's like we talk about, you know, the purpose of what we're doing is trying to, you know, some of what we do is to help with mental health and communication and talk about stuff. You made a good point where it's almost the lazy way out to just try and make it cut and dry.
Yeah.
And it's really not. Instead of having an open, honest conversation of why does this keep happening, you know, and maybe even, you know, to the point of having Fox and CNN have a civil conversation. I don't know how you would ever do that. But
I think it's beyond that, yeah.
You know, but that's what we're trying to get across. You know, it's kind of what we're talking about is, you know, the round table thing or water cooler talk or whatever. You know, maybe you could have that civil conversation, and it is something difficult to talk about. We talk about difficult things, so maybe it is something you could talk about. And the more people that talk within that gray area, maybe it becomes less gray. You know.
So, I mean, unequivocally, you can, and it has been done. You know, the problem becomes over the years. I mean, a lot of those inner city programs I was involved in, like that basketball, that was done by officers. You know, those officers that was putting that on, and they were there, and there was a great relationship there. Those kids had a much different viewpoint of police officers than someone else that weren't a part of it or didn't have those exchanges.
Yeah, I grew up playing PAL football, Police Athletic League football, which I think pretty sure Chicago has PAL. I was in Detroit.
Yeah, they do. You're right.
Yeah. And you had a department that sponsored every team.
And were there officers at games and stuff like that?
Some of the officers were coaches. Not every team's coaches were officers.
Sure.
But some of them, the officers from that precinct, was like, I'll do the coaching. Some of them, like my team, we had coaches, but we had sponsored uniforms from a certain precinct. And then you'd have officers out at the games and stuff like that. So you were used to seeing these guys, you know. So, like, I understand, like, how community policing works because you get used to seeing certain officers and you develop, like,
a relationship.
For sure. Familiarity, you know. And when he comes around, it's not, he or she, when they come around, it's not like, oh my God, here comes this guy.
Right.
You know, he's just a member of the community. And then it's less likely for people to do nefarious things, although he's around, you know. So when you do that, it's hard because he is going to have some people who have bad relationships with police officers. And he may not be welcome.
For sure.
You know. He may be, you know, left on the outskirts of certain situations, but it takes time to build that rapport and to build that trust within that community. And I don't see that happening in a lot of places, but I don't have a scope of everywhere. Right. But just looking at the climate, I'm not seeing that.
Well, because you're definitely, and I mean, both of your points are dead on that, you know, and you know, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's laziness. It's just wanting to simplify the problem, and we're just and everything's a quick fix society. We want to figure it out right away. We want to cast blame. And we definitely talked about this a little bit in the last podcast. You know, we were real quick to make somebody the bad guy, and nobody wants to accept that there's several sides and there's several degrees to that. To your point about with the community programs, you know, it does two things. One, it's showing kids, youth, that police officers aren't bad. Here they are. He's just a guy just like you and me. Shows the officer, these are kids. They're not all bad. They're kids just like kids anywhere else. So what ends up, you know, eventually happening, and you have empathy from both sides. You have an understanding from both sides. The problem is, if you don't start with that, you have exactly what we have right now. If there's no empathy to understanding that where that party's coming from and where the other party's coming from, you have zero discussion because you're right, I'm wrong. You know, I saw the video, and so, you know, I don't know those of you out there who've seen it or not, it pretty much opens with they're already on him, meaning cop pulls up, he's running out, came out crazy aggressive. Anybody who says otherwise, I don't know what the hell you're watching. You know, was cursing him out pretty quick. Get the hell out of the car. I think he did say something about shooting him. You know, again, don't quote me on that. I could be wrong, but definitely came out hot. Now, again, I don't know if he was avoiding them. I don't know if they kept trying to pull him over and he's running them out for a while. I have no idea, and that very well could be the case. But when the video opens, that's what it opens to. They kind of get him out. To me, just like every other circumstance, he's resisting. Now, again, we've watched this over and over and over again. Why you continue to have that resisting? Well, fight or flight. Is there not a trust there where, hey, I don't trust you guys. What the hell are you doing with me? So they're trying to get away. Is it just they're freaking out because the aggressiveness of the situation? Again, I can't answer any of that question. My logical mind tells me, you know, regardless if you're black or not at this point, if you got 6 cops rolling down on you, listen, comply, move on with life, because it's just too hot. So there's a lot of resistance there. Again, why? Can't answer. It looks like a littler guy. There was about 4 of them, might have been 5 of them. Seemed to have a really hard time getting cuffs on him and getting them down. So what it looked like to me, this was from one of the officers' chest cams, looked like somebody sprayed him, didn't catch him, caught the officers. Now, I don't, have all you guys been pepper sprayed?
Yeah. I have.
So that shit hurts.
Yeah,
so you hear a lot of coughing, wiping eyes. And in the meantime, looked like somebody tried to tase him, either missed, didn't catch him, because at this point he got up and he's getting ready to bolt, missed him. So now you have, in fact, 2 of them didn't even go on the chase because they couldn't see and were coughing. And then you kind of see the camera that's posted high where they must have caught up to him at that point. And then that's when a lot of this shit happened. Now, again, to me, and I've been in this position, you're already on my bad side, and I had to chase you. So it's kind of like your mom when she was going to whoop your ass and you ran, so you caught it worse. I saw that happening from the word go. So the second that dude split, I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And that's kind of where it happened. Now, in that exchange, again, it looked like they were having a really hard time getting them under control. Now, my point to this is, keywords for me looked like. I wasn't there. The camera's shooting from quite a distance away. You have no idea what's being said. You have no idea what's really going on. All you see is what you see. And it looked like they were having a hard time getting them down again. And they were crazy aggressive. That's when the fists flew. Looked like one of them had their batons out, caught them with that. They did finally get him down. Guy definitely kicked him. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, what I want to be clear about as Daryl stated at the beginning, way out of pocket. So you're an officer of the law. You cannot be doing that shit. These guys are all up for second-degree murder at this point. If that's where it's gone, then you got that coming.
Right.
And I even said with Chauvin, with the Minnesota case, same thing for Floyd. That's on you. That's not to say I don't understand. So I've literally been in that position where I had to chase somebody and finally caught them. It wasn't good.
Well, same.
Because you're pissed.
Right.
The difference is I'm not a cop. They are.
That's the.
I was about to say, yeah. That's
you're kind of talking. There's that mindset. There's that. As we're talking these gray areas. I think and again, this is all speculation. I don't know how you do it, and I don't. I think the school of thought for policing was maybe this way, and obviously we're saying that that's not the right way, and things need to change somewhere along the line. I'm not a cop, but I did some time in some very not good bars and involved myself in motorcycle clubs and ended up in situations where you do have to fight. And there is that, for me, I know I tend to black out, and it's kind of, as you come to, there's a guy on the floor and there's blood and you don't know what's going on. And you just run out the back door. It was kind of the MO. And I'm not a cop. I know I shouldn't be a cop because
I have the temperament.
If it's something, I don't have a temper, but in those situations, you're right. There's that fight or flight, and on both sides, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So.
My point for going over it is so we all know. I mean, hopefully at this point, anybody who's watching it knows that that's way out of line, and whatever the consequences are, they fully have them coming. My point being, we can also acknowledge the fact that, yes, obviously temperament, same thing with the officer that lit the guy up with the knife. To me, that officer felt threatened. The other three didn't. Should the guy go to jail over it? I can't really say that. In my opinion, the guy's got a knife. If I felt threatened, I'm lighting him up too. Did it have to be the full clip? It's a whole other story. Now, did he go in shock? Whatever. I have no idea. It's not my business. Not my place to say. Should that guy be an officer? Absolutely not. Definitely doesn't have the temperament in it. In this scenario, because of how far it went and how far they took it, like I said, I get the second-degree murder charge on it. I can also say I get where it got to. I understand why they reacted. I also don't think they should be cops. They don't have the temperament for it. But I could understand that frustration. I could say it because I did it. I can also say that, fortunately, in my scenario, I didn't kill anybody over it. I just caught a beating and life moved on, which I'm sure has been the previous cases for them. In this scenario, and I'm sure we'll find out when the autopsy comes out, whatever happened, and, the poor guy died over it. What frustrates me about it is, how did this happen? Oh, my God. Why does this keep happening? This is crazy. Cops are bad. They're the Gestapo. List goes on and on. Then you get to the other side. Why does this keep happening? Why do they resist arrest every single time? Blah, 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 blah. And so basically you get juiced up on whatever point of view you want to take, and nobody can say, well, I kind of could see how this keeps happening. Because you're playing into, again, sociology, psychology, and human nature in all of these accounts. Where everybody's going to react differently. And again, the environment that you're in, what's going on. I mean, that was a tactical unit for them, which I've known tons of Chicago tactical units.
Really?
Have you gotten into Mayor of Kingstown yet?
Not yet, no.
So there's a tactical unit in that. And, they're SWAT guys, these are usually high charge guys, probably the kind of guys you dealt with, you know, were partners in special forces. When you're to that type of level, you're wired a certain way. Mm-hmm. It's just human nature. You know, that's why you're doing it. You know, you're highly motivated to help. And again, where your temperature gauge is at, where what's necessary and what's not, Daryl's is going to be different than mine. Mine's going to be different than yours. And then you have these scenarios. And again, you know, Daryl really hit it on the head to, you know, in my opinion, eventually what's the fix to this? One, having real conversations about it. Mm-hmm. So I get why you act this way. I understand why you're acted this way. That being said, you kill a guy. Mm-hmm. You know, this can't continue. I can understand officers saying, you know, listen, I was pissed. So if any of those, I don't think any of them have been reviewed or interviewed, I'm saying, mm-hmm. When they come out and say, listen, we were trying to pull him over. He wouldn't pull over. Now, first of all, I've been in Chicago long enough. When I see a camera in the sky, you're not in a great neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So you can walk anywhere around here, you're not seeing any cameras anywhere. It's sign number one. It's not a great neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That group came together because just like Chicago and a lot of other cities, mm-hmm. you know, murder rates were skyrocketing. Yep. They actually found, I think it was made 500 arrests, found 300 guns. So, I mean, they were doing some good. But you're dealing with that day in and day out. If the guy ran on him, and again, I have no clue if that's the case, just pure speculation. And they came out hot like that, then you lost them. Because you can literally hear when you do get on the cop camera, they're out of breath. Mm-hmm. And even after all of it happened, they finally have him against a squad. They're all hunched over, still can't breathe from chasing him. That's a whole other story about shape they're in or, you know, whatever. But all of that is just a potpourri of aggravation. And when you're doing that, that's the kind of thing you get. Again, probably shouldn't be a cop if you're that, if that's where you're at. Mm-hmm. But you should also be able to say, us as citizens, us as individuals, I get it. I understand. That can't happen. Mm-hmm. So what's the next step of that? Then the other party says, well, you're right. Obviously, we can't act that way. But listen, we're in a hot area. Mm-hmm. I just pulled up and I hear these stories all the time from officers. I just came out of an apartment where a 6-year-old got shot in the face. That's still sitting with me. Mm-hmm. Now I'm chasing you. Look like you're resisting, or I feel like you're resisting, so I'm coming off aggressive because I live with all that. And what you hope to have is empathy on both sides where, okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. So when I get pulled over, what movie was it, Boys in the Hood, where we went over what happens when you get pulled over?
No.
There was a movie where...
They got pulled over in Boys in the Hood, but they didn't really go over.
There was a movie where the father kept going over with the child on what to do when you get pulled over from an officer. Or was that the most recent one that quoted Tupac? Yeah, that's what it was.
What's that?
The hate you give.
Yeah, the hate you give. That is in there. Yeah.
That was in there. You know, if that's the type of scenario needs to be talked about, I don't know. You know, it's so frustrating that we have to inflame all this and nobody's having any true dialogue about it.
There's no dialogue going on in places where it should be. There's dialogue that's happening, mm-hmm. but they're all small conversations. And the thing with those conversations is it's not enough counter ideals. So typically people get together and they have those conversations with people with like minds on the situation. Mm-hmm. And it's a bunch of agreements on what should have happened or, you know.
Right.
And but it needs to be those same type of conversations with both sides being explored. You're not seeing a lot of that in these situations. So I don't know how to fix that because anytime you go into a higher level, that's when sensationalizing starts. So then you either get more lost if it gets on a platform that can reach multiple people. So mainstream stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your CNNs, your Foxes and stuff. You'll never get like a clear picture from those because they have agendas that they need to align their programs with.
For sure.
So it's really hard. I mean, I think people need to, like, if it's something that interests you, look at it from both sides, do some research, and then develop your own opinion on the subject. Now, that's not going to change anything, you know, overall, but that'll help people individually start to understand things.
Sure.
And then with that, you'll start seeing change. It's just a very, very slow change in that. With the issue, one of the things I see too is like, and this is from Iraq and stuff, and this was in Vietnam and everywhere. You look at once you create a divide, it's very hard to come back from that divide. Okay. You know, because when you come around, like for me, for example, no one can expect my submittance. Mm-hmm. So you can be a judge, you can be a police officer, be fucking president of the United States. I don't submit to you because of a title that you have. Mm-hmm. So if you go into a situation and expect that you know, this person should submit to me because I had his uniform, I had his badge, that's where you're already starting to lose right then. Because especially if you look at it in history, it shows that people don't submit, humans don't submit to aggressors. It's mm-hmm. very, very rare that it happens. And you'll never see a situation going through history where 100% of people submitted because somebody said this person was a power or a force to submit to. It's not. It's always going to be a rebellion. And that's where we're at right now with urban communities and police officers. It's that rebellion. Right. So nobody's going to submit to, I mean, people will, but there's going to be people who just refuse to submit because of the climate.
For sure.
The other thing you have to look at is the anxiety part of it. If you have people who think that, and I know people who think like this, if you get stopped by the police, you might not come out of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you could fail to use your turn signal, mm-hmm. and that can result in your death. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's a heavy amount of anxiety that comes along with that, which causes people to behave certain ways. Right. Because the last several times you've seen encounters on TV and on the news and even in movies and TV shows now, you see it where the person in your shoes comes out harmed or dead. Mm-hmm. So when it really happens to you in real life, it's surreal, and you got red and blue lights flashing behind you. Mm-hmm. That panic attack can insist or can come about and then cause you to behave erratically. Erratic behavior doesn't account for killing somebody, though.
Agreed. Completely.
With the guy with the knife, just coming from my background, I've never been scared of nobody with a knife unless they are within striking distance. Mm-hmm. A gun is different because the striking distance on the gun is way further than a knife. Right. You know, even throwing a knife, your likelihood of throwing it and actually penetrating somebody is very dismal. It's not, you know, unless you've trained repeatedly. So, like, when I look at the guy from here who he shot the guy with the knife, he was coked up on PCP or whatever. Mm. That was just fear, or more likely, that was the excuse, because you get these rules of engagement and says that if this person has a deadly weapon, which a knife is a deadly weapon in the right scenario, then you are allowed to return in deadly force. Right. You know? So they're looking for that thing that, okay, that's the deadly weapon. I can shoot this motherfucker. Mm-hmm. I've known guys like that too.
For sure.
You know? Yeah. So you have to look at, is somebody just trying to get their rocks off? Did you meet the qualifying, like, factors to where this person can engage you, and then they can get off with it? Because they said I can shoot him if he had a deadly weapon. Mm-hmm. He did have a deadly weapon. Now, was it feasible for him to use that weapon? Not likely to hurt you, you know. But that's not what it said. It didn't say, you know, it had to be a feasible scenario for them to use that deadly weapon. It just said if they had a deadly weapon and you felt harm, then you can engage them. A lot of rules of engagement are pretty baseline like that. Sure. You know, so we see that, and people have excuses, and they know what they need to do or they need to see to engage somebody. So you say he came out hostile in this current situation. He had already been a reckless driver, and then he made them run and wrestle and sprayed one of their partners. So it's some aggravation that came.
No doubt about it.
You know, so when they
it's obvious.
When they got him, I'm gonna fuck this dude up.
It's obvious.
You know, that actually happened to a friend of mine in my high school days, where we were being typical inner city Detroit kids, and we got into it with the police, and he broke on them. ran, and they had to catch him. They ended up cutting him off, and the guy that was in pursuit of him couldn't catch him, but a car pulled up and cut him off. And when they got him, the guy who was in pursuit punched him. So when I saw him, like in the next couple of days, he had a big dot on his eye. I'm like, what the hell happened to you? And he was like, we knew this officer's name too. And he's like, oh, bitch ass such and such punched me when he caught me. Said that's for making me run. You know, and we laughed about it as a kid, but now as an adult, I think of how unprofessional that was. Right. Because it's your job to pursue anybody that's under investigation if they leave the scene. It's just in your job to pursue them. So for somebody making you do your job, it doesn't require that you hit them, especially a kid. But even still, I've seen that in other scenarios where you made somebody do their job. It was a little bit harder, you know, but that don't mean you have to take out that aggression because now you're a professional. You're not on the street. So if somebody make me run and I have a little bit more aggravation and I want to take it out on them, I can. I'm still under a certain amount of circumstances, though, that can come with that. Because if I go too much, I may be standing in front of a judge having to explain that. Correct. You know? But at the end of the day, I'm still not a professional. Once you're a professional, you have to be a professional. And it's even in those times where it really counts is in those times where it kind of pushes you into that gray area.
Well, I mean, what I would say with that, I mean, professionalism is definitely a part of that equation. I think the other part is it depends on what that person believes is effective. So I know for a fact, when I was younger, criminals, I knew you did not mess with the police. You did not do it. If you did, unequivocally, 100%, you were getting your head cracked open. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Not saying that's right, not saying that's wrong. It's just something everybody knew. Today, we look at, they're spitting in cops' faces, throwing punches, all kinds of stuff. And my point is, I'm certainly not saying the beginning part was right. This sure in hell ain't right, because we see the spillover in Chicago, in Memphis, and all these different cities, all these different places, period. We see it with kids. There was a 6-year-old just shot his teacher in freaking class. You know, I think that's the constant tough part about walking that line of, and that's kind of why I added criminality to the end part of this title is, you know, that needs to be dealt with. And the reality is there's some extremely crappy people out there that need to be dealt with in certain ways, and nothing's going to change that. You can hug them, you can mentor them, you can tutor them, you can do anything you want. There's just unfortunately, there's some bad people out there that want to do bad shit, and part of that is hurting other people. It gets really difficult on, okay, well, how do you go about that? And understanding that that's an extreme. So in my heart, that evil person is few and far between. There's not tons of people out there that are like that. That being said, I also acknowledge there's definitely people out there like that. I've known them. I've met them. All of us have. You know, we've all known people that just want to hurt somebody. Now, it's not saying that they didn't have some traumatic experience. Many I know that are like that were raped, molested as kids. Horrible things have happened to them that kind of got them to that point. It doesn't make it right. You know, my biggest concern with this is, again, just like we're doing now, to be able to have a conversation about it and be able to understand, at least not even understand, acknowledge both sides and not sensationalize everything. You know, I haven't seen statistics on how many officers made arrests yesterday, but I'm assuming there was a shit ton. There's no videos yet. Hopefully there's not any coming out. So, I mean, this stuff is done day in and day out. And I'm also not saying that there isn't abuses done in and day out, because I'm sure there are. But not every cop is bad. Not every black man's causing mischief. Not every Arab guy is a freaking terrorist. I mean, the lists go on and on and on. All of that being said, when September 11th hit, 3 days later, you were getting on a plane and there was a dude in a burqa, 100% you're clocking that guy. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation.
I'm Lebanese. There's a very long time I didn't tell anybody I was Lebanese. You know, just and for that, you know, and you kind of mentioned earlier, like how do you get that divide back? I do feel like now, like Middle Eastern culture is far more accepted in this country than it was after September 11th.
Yeah, it's making a comeback, but it's definitely.
But there's still, you know, there's still a thing there. You know?
No doubt.
So, yeah, I don't know.
And I think part of that is, again, understanding. So for you, you know, you're about to get on a plane and everybody's getting side-eyed. You have two ways to react to that. This is bullshit. I didn't blow up shit. I've never done any of this. I'm not even freaking Muslim. I'm Christian.
Right.
I don't have to deal with this shit, which is certainly one way of dealing with it. We know where that gets us because we're talking about it.
Yep.
The other way is, okay, I understand why these people are looking at me. This situation just happened. It's not me personally. I'm going to be the best version of me possible. Because my point is what eventually happens, and I've seen it left and right. I mean, Daryl's experienced it many times in his life. You have an opinion of somebody. You meet them. That opinion starts to dissipate because you thought this and this and this. And then, oh, shit, I was kind of wrong about that. And I was wrong about this. I was definitely wrong about that. Now that stuff is away. Person number two comes in and I was wrong about Daryl. So this might be wrong about John too.
Right.
My point is that's where you start getting that ability to be able to see other people's sides, other people's qualities, all of that stuff. That's what ends so racism exists. So if you don't think it is, you live in a freaking box. It's 100% out there. It's also grown tremendously. The stuff that I seen when I was young, as far as racism goes, we are so far advanced from what that was. So, when I was younger, black and white couple was unheard of. Whereas I see it on TV, I see it all the time now. That was unimaginable 25 years ago. We see it constantly now. I'm sure we're at a point where for your kids, even seeing color in general is much different than it was for us when we were younger.
I think it definitely is.
So we can both say that racism exists. It's definitely a part of our society, unquestionably. But we can also say, well, we've also covered a lot of ground. We've had a lot of growth. And it seems like it's so hard for anybody to say both.
Right.
Like it's got to be, nope, there's still a bunch of racist-ass people, or nope, look how much growth we made. There's no racism. Nobody can just acknowledge both sides.
Yeah, that's the great. We have to stay on opposite ends. Nobody wants to move into that middle ground. And that's where the understanding is in anything.
Agreed. It's the whole point of this podcast.
Getting into that middle ground. I don't know. I'd have to ask my kids, like, kind of what they see. I mean, it's kind of different because my kids are mixed. Like, they have,
Correct.
It's crazy, like, when I go to their schools. I mean, not now because they've been in the same school for years now. But when we would move, when I was in the service, I remember, like, if I went and picked them up from school, like, it was always the kids, though. They would be shocked to see me. Or when their mom would go and pick them up, they would be shocked to see their mom. Because for especially when they were younger, my kids just looked like Spanish. The oldest and the youngest the most. My middle son, I guess he looks mixed, but he has like a blonde afro. So I guess like you could tell he was from a mixed household, but they would always tell me, like, I come, they'd be like, "Yo, that's your dad?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like, "Your real dad?" I'm like, "Yes, like my real dad."
Oh.
And then their mom would go and pick them up. And they're like, "That lady's your mom?" Like, "Yes, that's my mom." Yeah. And so that kind of molded my kids' views on things like that. And it's something I would kind of ask them here and there. But like they told me when they first came back here and they were in DeKalb, that people thought they were Spanish, so they would just go up and speak Spanish to them. My kids were like, I don't know what you're saying. Yeah. So they have an interesting perspective on it. Something I'll bring up to them, but to this topic and conversation is always the middle ground where we need to get to.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
So again, I don't think we resolved racism today. I don't think we resolved the problems and obstacles in policing. I don't think we solved the crime problem, and nor were we trying to. Really what we're hoping is to be able to have honest, genuine conversations about it, understand there's both sides to it. Mm-hmm. You don't have to say that's right or wrong, just have to acknowledge.
Yeah.
I'll be crystal clear. I'm not okay with what Chauvin did whatsoever. 100% should serve time. Mm-hmm. If, everything comes back on this poor guy most recently, that those kicks, that baton, whatever it was, caused brain damage, and that's what killed the poor guy, they 100% should serve time. Mm-hmm. Not advocating anything otherwise. It's just we need to really stop sensationalizing everything, going such extremes with everything and taking all humanity out of it, taking all perspective out of it. We've all seen the movies. So even when the stuff with Floyd, right away, it was racist. So I didn't hear any racist epithets thrown, which we've seen. Mm-hmm. So I've seen it where that stuff was thrown, mm-hmm. On video. That's a racist. Unequivocally, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No question. Done deal. I didn't hear any of that in that. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying the dude wasn't a racist. I don't know. I don't know the freaking guy. Mm-hmm. But neither does anybody else who's watching it.
Right.
So why are we so quick to put that label on it?
Yeah, it sells. It gets people to tune in.
Fuels the media machine.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it.
Gets you to click on that mm-hmm. story, watch that video. We kind of talked about it last podcast about, if you're around your friends talking about this, if you have a friend that's pushing hard one way, maybe that's not the friend, Maybe that's, somebody's playing the devil's advocate there. And maybe we can then, you can be the bigger person and mm-hmm. slow that person down and say, well, maybe there is another side. I guess that's the point of today.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is opening up that, let's bring everybody to that gray area.
For sure.
Yeah. The other thing too is let the cards come out first, because
absolutely
we're very, very fast as a society to this happened and then this is what happened. This is how it happened. So a lot of times when any major events happen, I don't tune in right away because I know how the process of information goes. And in those first hours and those first couple of days, you don't know shit. Mm-hmm. You're still gathering information, and after you gather all the information, then you can start to determine what's pertinent or not. And we're so quick to just gather everything mm-hmm. and put everything out. We're not looking at what makes sense and what is aligned with the scenario specifically. And so we just get fast food processed. We want our shit and we want it now.
Right.
Information, food, Amazon, you can order anything and get it tomorrow. That's how we like stuff. Right. But in situations with humans, it's always going to be complex, and we have to slow it down and let things develop and give it time. But we're kind of losing that now, and it's frustrating.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this is helpful in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, been a lot of requests to talk about it. We kind of avoided it. It's not the most uplifting conversation, but this conversation needs to take place. But thank you for tuning in. Please share, like, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
And thank you guys.